growing weary of running from room to room, practicing one-tooth insurance-driven dentistry? Then stay tuned for the latest episode of The Lionhearted, where Dr. Stephen Rasner will hand you the blueprint for what many call the gold standard of general practice dentistry.
Hi everyone, Dr. Steve Rasner here. Welcome back to the Lionhearted, a podcast dedicated to my colleagues that still believe in the dream, that still believe we can have that independent fee-for-service practice and get compensated and live our dental professional lives on our terms, not the terms of corporate dentistry, not the terms of toxic insurance providers. And I've been doing it for 39 years, not totally 39 years free of insurance, but certainly now, and certainly for some years. And I'm not here to advocate that you get out of it in the next, months or even years. I'm advocating that you take steps to develop a practice that is very much in existence today, no matter where you're located. My area of practice is very well documented. I'm in southern New Jersey, in an area clearly challenged by less than ideal economic metrics that anybody would read about these days. And it's just been like that since I've been there. So this podcast is an evolving story of how I've done it. And I know that you can do it. And it does take a commitment and take some bumps and even doubts at times that if this is really possible. But don't think that you're a failure or you're less than you would like to be if you're still taking insurance. Of course, you can't go right out of dental school and not accept insurance plans, or, you have to prove and establish, to be honest with you, who you are as an office, as a business that goes way beyond your clinical skill, by the way, and prove that you are a place worthy of patients going out of network, because that's the only way you're going to be able to achieve such a practice. Insurance isn't going away. So the only way you can get to this place is to put all the parameters in place that add up to, yeah, this is worth it. I know I go out of network to Dr. Smith, and I know I pay more for the services. You understand, in almost all the cases of people with insurance, well over 99%, they're still going to get reimbursed by their insurance companies. They're just not going to get as much for each service as they would if you were in network. And I'm here to tell you that even in my market, which is probably not the best market, meaning consumers who have disposable income to spend on dentistry. And let's not forget that a lot of things we do are elective. They are. You don't have to replace the tooth you just lost on number 3 or number 30 to live. Very often we treat pathology that lacks the symptoms so the patient doesn't even know they have. Look, we have chosen, I know we didn't think about this when we first applied to dental school. And I know that when you're setting up your shingles and starting this journey, that you don't think about the things I'm saying to you right now, but it's reality. And that changes the rules on lots of things that you need to do to make you successful. You don't need any of Rasner's Lionhearted protocols if you just want to open up and be okay with receiving 30 to 45% less than they used to pay you for these services with insurances. You don't have to do all the things I say. You don't have to worry about morning meetings and motivation and all those things. I know that sounds outlandish to those of you that listen to me. I assume that most of you that tune in because you still want the dream. And it isn't a dream, man. It's real. Or why would I be doing this? I don't charge for these podcasts. Why would I get on the air every week and try to impart just a few tidbits to you as you're driving to work or wherever you're listening? And by the way, I want to first say Happy New Year to some of you if I haven't said it already. And I want to welcome my colleagues that have tuned in recently from Chile, Tanzania, Syria, Korea. Look, there's not a million of you listening to me down there in those parts of the world. But those of you in Europe that have been listening, please write to me. I haven't gotten as many emails as I used to, so I can maximize, even if it's 1 or 2 pearls per week, that may change your year. I mean, they'll definitely change your year. If they're coming out of my mouth, they're real, and they're tested, and they're proven. Because I wouldn't get on this platform and tell you theory, things I think will work. Everything you hear me tell you, I've done for years. Sometimes I change my protocols, but pretty much I've stuck to everything we talk about. And today we're going to talk about something that I don't hear much about, and that's that pain in the neck checkup visit where you have to get up from whatever you're doing and go into another room and maximize those few minutes with that patient in that room. It's funny, when you're early in your career, right, you kind of measure your success to some degree on how many hygienists you have. And I have 5. It probably works out to 4 full-time hygienists. And I remember when I got to 3, because in the state of New Jersey, in the United States, that's the maximum you can have for one dentist. And I remember thinking to myself, this is lunacy. How can I possibly perform quality dentistry in another room and get up 3 times per hour to go check a patient? And you're not just checking a patient. You're continuing to nurture relationships with people that you hope will be with you a lifetime. You are responsible. You don't want to do a 20-second check. Think about what you did when you got out of dental school. That's probably the best exams you ever did, to be honest with you, because you just came from a very thorough, vigilant background when it came to looking for pathology. And don't tell me, because I know I've done it. On a given day when you're in a hectic situation in an operatory and your hygienist comes in, let alone maybe 2 others in the same hour, that hand you a note, and I'm going to get into that you have educated them while they've been on your watch. This is how we do it. So they come in to tell you that they're ready, and your blood runs like cold. Like you're almost angry that they're in the room. I remember feeling like that. Like there's no regard to what you're doing right now. Well, that's what you chose. That's one of the things that you and I have selected to do as GPs. We have this thing built into our business and built into our model as a GP where we have to check patients constantly. So how do you maximize that? I've never heard anybody talk about that. I'm sure it has been discussed, but I don't remember it. So that's the basis of today. But before I forget, I do want to thank all of you for tuning in. It means a lot to me. You heard me say many times over these months and now over a year, I've been doing these podcasts, that it's hard because I'm sitting here right now talking to you in my kitchen. I don't know how well it resonates with you. I certainly want to waste your time. Your time is as valuable as mine. So that's why it helps if you write to me and tell me what you want my thoughts. Because remember, I'm one guy. I'm one guy that has a special talent, a special set of skills, as they said in the movie Taken. Right? Well, my skills aren't taking out bad guys. My skills are developing a thriving general practice in an area that nobody listening to me right now would ever open up a practice in today or in the last 39 years that I've been there. You wouldn't look at this community and say, oh, this is a great opportunity to have a thriving dental practice. And yet, as the years have evolved, not only has the economics not improved, but the challenges that weren't there in the 1980s and 90s, like corporate dentistry, like the horrific influence of insurance, how it changed, how they decreased substantially our payments for the same services I was doing 20 years ago. I'm dealing with that too, and it still has had a pretty thriving practice. Has not experienced a decrease in any but 3 years ever in my 39. And if you're tuning in for the first time, that was 2009, 10, and 11. The United States was in a recession. We had 4 prior recessions, and I used to remember saying to my close friends, that I was recession-proof. I thought I was. I thought it didn't matter what the economy did. My model can beat it. Now remember, when you hear me say my model, that encompasses a lot of stuff. In general, it's delivering clinical excellence. I mean, it really is. It's probably ahead of that is the palpable communication connections between me and my patients, which is what I'm pushing for you to do. Really tuning in that moment when I do go back to hygiene recall, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, and when I meet a patient for the first time, or when I'm doing another step in a series of visits of their treatment plan. Where are we at today? And not at all being robotic about it, but being very human, being very passionate about it. When I get a shade off or something's wrong with one of my cases, I had a case in last week that I was supposed to do final impressions, and it was like 6 through 13. One of the teeth, number 11, was an implant I had placed 5 months earlier. And I was set. But I kept looking at number 11, the implant, and it had no attached gingiva. It wasn't inflamed at all. The patient had been in provisionals, as I've just told you, for several months. I gave up the opportunity to take the impressions and do what I was supposed to do, which would have been a much more productive visit, to change the procedure and do a free gingival graft in that particular case, and delayed the procedure by another couple months. I didn't have a lot of hard time explaining it to that patient, because I believe that patient reflects my typical patient, and hopefully yours too, and that she understood. I wasn't worried, oh my God, she's going to be upset because it's not done yet. I mean, maybe somebody in my family of patients would react like that, but most of them wouldn't, because I didn't have an agenda. I mean, I didn't even charge her for it, by the way. I thought it was the onus was on me from the very beginning to know there was enough attached keratinized tissue around my implants, which is one of the number one reasons they'll recede. And it wasn't even an aesthetic concern of mine, because she had a very low lip line. If it did recede, it had not receded. It's just, are you kidding me? I'm going to take the impressions knowing this going in? So I changed the whole procedure that day, explained it to her. I think her takeaway is what I want your patient's takeaway to be. It's, listen, doc, if that's what you think's best, that's what I want you to do. I'm okay. And one of the reasons she's okay is because one of my fundamental protocols of restorative work is that you provide really nice provisionals, not sloppy provisionals, so that there's never a gun to your head. So a little bit off the track there, but let's get back to this recall business that I want the podcast to be about. So as I said earlier, it's more than you just walking in to do a checkup. You're maintaining, think about it, a relationship with a patient that believes in you. Sometimes when I've walked in my office over the years, on a Monday especially, and that's one of the days I have 3 hygienists at the same time, and it feels for a moment a little bit overwhelming. Anxiety kicks into me, and I'm almost like mad that I got all this stuff to do, even though I created that. And I have to say to you that if that ever happens to you, you should stop for a moment and be proud that every single person in the chair or in the reception room are there because they believe in you. They could have gone to any number of dentists. They believe in you. This is what you have built. So unless you're ready to sell or get out, you got to suck it up and be proud of that moment and be able to accommodate all those people, if it's a Monday or a Thursday or whatever it is. That's important. Sometimes I think we lose sight of exactly what we're doing each day. And it's easy to, because you're in the battle every day, putting out all these little fires and creating all these, crossing T's and dotting I's to make all this work. So one of the ways I've made it work over the years is I've simplified the hygiene checkup protocols. And here, let me explain why. So number one way I have to say first is remember that periodontal health in my practice, and should be in yours too, is a cornerstone, a line in the sand that I will not look over. In other words, if a patient, if a patient needs quadrant scaling and root planing, even if we did it 2 years ago, and my hygienist says it's not acceptable for her to say, I'll just do a G scale today, or I'll do it a little bit more thorough, and we'll take another look at it 6 months from now. That's a line in the sand I'm not willing to cross, because the periodontal health of your patients should be numero uno. It is what makes your work last the longest. It is so often overlooked by so many of us, including me at times in my career, because nobody's going to come in and scream to you about localized inflammation or generalized inflammation, in their mouth. They're not going to talk to you about early perio. So that's not acceptable. So a lot of my patients are on 3 and 4 month recalls. And if they are on a 3 or 4 month recall, and it's in that time, and I saw them last time, I have a strong enough faith and relationship with my hygienist that I don't feel compelled to examine them every time on a 3 or 4 month recall. Naturally, I have to see them at least twice a year. Now, that being said, if they have to be seen, I also leave that in the hands of my hygienist. So that's one way. And I have such a large percentage, because of my philosophy, of people on 3 and 4 month recall. And by the way, I tell those patients that from the very first time I meet them. Like if I'm talking about scaling root planing, maybe earlier in my career, I wouldn't be as explicit as I was about the fact that, insurance isn't going to pay for that. It's like today, as if I almost don't want them to embark on this journey unless they really clearly hear what I am saying. Like, it's very, this is true, that they'll come in for that 3 or 4 month checkup and then be surprised that they had to pay or that insurance doesn't cover, even though you went over that to some degree. I really go over it. Don't expect your insurance company to pay more than twice a year. This isn't about your insurance company. This is about how healthy you want to be. And in this office, gum health is everything to me. And you should want me to feel that way. And I have all kinds of literature about the association, periodontitis with the systemic system of the patient. And I can get that to you, by the way. I actually have a picture of a human. It's like an image of a human and all the associated ailments and systemic issues they can have as a result of periodontal disease. So any of you that want that, simply mail it to me. I'll get it to Beth and we'll get it out to you. It's quite nice to put in your hygiene rooms. Number 2, we have a morning meeting every day, and part of the morning meeting goes over hygiene. Now, one of the things that happens in that meeting is the hygienists are expected to look through their schedule to get to the office early or have done it on the preceding day to look at the patients on the schedule that day that have a history of scaling and root planing. And is it over 2 years old, especially? And in my office, the philosophy is, it is what it is. We don't want to scale and root plane them again because no patients love that, right? and they don't like paying for it. But it is what it is. So your antenna's got to be up, does it not? For the patients on the hygiene schedule that are coming in that have had a history of scaling and root planing. And we also want our insurance department to know what the coverage is on those patients that have had scaling and root planing in the event they need it again. And this is why. Because if you walk into that patient and they had it done in 2017, and you tell them today that they need, I know we just did this 3 years ago, and I know it doesn't hurt, but this is the number one cause of loss of teeth in the world. It has a number one influence more than anything else on your overall body health. And it's really our responsibility to bring you right in tune to that. Now, do I ever get patients deny that? I do. And we have a form that they'll sign. And it's important that you have that form, declining care. Because people get selective memory. Patients have selective memory. And then that's all up in place. And if this becomes a federal process, a federal investigation, like they're in your hygiene chair, and now you're talking about the possibility of scaling root planing, and now they got to go to the insurance department for 20 minutes, and then you have a whole visit that's wasted. And sometimes that happens, and you have to reschedule. You always hear me say this on the podcast. We're doctors first, right? We got to do the right thing, right? So part of me saying it again, it is what it is. So the first thing is having hygiene go through their own schedules. 2, bringing it up at the morning meeting, viewing the hygiene. My hygienist, I'm 39 years into this, come in to me individually every day and go over their schedule briefly. It takes maybe 2 minutes to do it, and I'll tell you what I mean by that in a second. And then the third thing is, remember, so the morning meeting, the hygienist doing their own review. 3, the fact that a lot of my patients on a 3 or 4 month recall don't have to be seen unless there's something new that's popped up. And then the fourth one I'm about to give you. And if you don't have this from me yet, you want my hygiene checkup slip, or whatever you want to call it. And what it is, each hygienist has their own checkup slip. And it's a Cliff Notes summary of what I need to know before I go in that room. Last time x-rays were taken. Last work I did for them. I want to be able to walk any special personal notes about the patient. So the hygienist will walk in, hand me this form. She does not have to verbally talk, because I don't like to be interrupted when I'm in a clinical operatory. So when they come in and drop the slip, I know why they're there. And each one has their name and some kind of icon that it's them. You know what I mean? When I have a hygienist named Valerie, Melissa, Heather, they each have their own little thing that I know it's them. And on that slip will be last x-rays taken, last work done, any notes about the last work, any work that's been previously discussed, upper right crown, patient decline crown since 2018, piece of restoration still missing, updated x-rays, anything that I might have brought up, personal information, reminding me that maybe she lost her husband or wife. I mean, these are all things, aren't they, that tune me right in. I look at it for literally 30 to 60 seconds before I walk in, but that's way better. And I expect my hygiene team to put me in a position to be efficient. Let's say they're wearing a partial denture or a denture and they developed a sore. I don't want to walk into the hygiene room and go ask them to get a bench engine or a dye stick. That is their responsibility. That's called being accountable. Photographs of something I've been watching, because we take a lot of photographs in our office, versus a photograph today. Maybe it's recession. So you want to get this slip from me, the hygiene checkup protocol slip, if you don't have it already. And you can modify it for yourself, but you have to have it because it shortens the time. If you have a limited number of rooms, and I know a lot of my young colleagues might only have 2 rooms, and you got to do what you got to do. I once had 2 rooms too. So you have to work with what you have to work with. But my point is, don't look at the hygiene recall as a penalty of part of being a dentist. It is the prize for you because you have so many patients coming to you that you need a hygienist, or certainly two, and then maybe three or whatever. First of all, look at it that way. Second of all, look at it as an opportunity to focus in on this relationship and continue it. I bet I've lost a lot of patients over the years that somehow that patient came in on a day that I might have been tuned out, and maybe that went on for, and maybe they didn't even need any clinical work, but maybe that lack of connection with me during the hygiene recalls led to that patient finally saying, and remember, in my kind of practice that I advocate, the fee-for-service practice, independence, not insurance-driven, not corporate. And look, I know I say that all the time. I don't want to indict all corporations, but I've said my piece on most of them. What I feel, I don't, in general, think they're great for dentistry. I don't. When you're trying to emulate the model on the Lionhearted, that model demands a lot of you. And part of it is constant connections with the people that made a commitment to be part of your umbrella of patients. And part of that connection very much comes from your hygiene recall. So don't overlook it. Don't poo-poo this podcast. That's a critical part of your success. Thanks for tuning in. I've got lots of good new stuff to give you as we go on. If you want to email me, it's my name, Dr. D.R. Rasner, R-A-S-N-E-R at AOL. I know, out of date with that, but that's where you send it. Have a great week. See you next week on The Lionhearted.